We're here at the AES show in New York on the Izotope booth with Evan, who's going to show us Ozone 7. So, Evan, it's a mastering plugin, essentially, right? What's it doing that's different to any of the other Ozones?
Previous versions, absolutely. So this is the new Ozone 7. We've added a bunch of new processing into it. We've also, so one of the new features actually is the advanced version, which has a bunch of new vintage kind of themed processing. Is now drastically cut in price as well. It used to be $1,000, now it's $500. And we're introducing as well the music production bundle, which includes Ozone 7 Advanced, Trash 2, Alloy 2, Nectar 2. But so this is the new version of Ozone. Now you'll see that right now I'm in the click to insert module page, and you'll see we have a bunch of new modules. One of the new features for our standard users is we brought over the dynamic EQ in the previous Ozone 6 standard into Ozone 7 Advanced. Really good for just carving out particular problem frequencies, as it's going to adjust depending on the incoming signal. We've also done some CPU improvements to it. That's always a requested feature.
Sure.
So we've done some CPU improvements here. But one of the things that we're really excited about is all of our new vintage processing. So one of the most exciting new modules is our vintage tape module. Now this was modeled after a Studer A10. So it's a much cleaner mastering tape console, but we really wanted to go about it from the angle of let's not introduce things like hiss or wow and flutter, because we're in the digital world. We don't need to introduce those kinds of things.
Right.
So it's really good for adding warmth and coloration. If you're dealing with too bright a track, you can use a sort of a positive bias to roll off some of that high end.
Right.
And automatically, so right now we're just adding in saturation classic with tape, really kind of odd ordered harmonics. If we want to add in some more kind of musical even harmonics as well, we can do that with this slider. So it's really kind of a tape machine that you can customize to however you want to master your track.
Right. Can we go back into that and just listen to the changes?
Absolutely. So this is with vintage tape bypassed.
Like you can't understand.
Jump forward where there's a little bit more action going on. So you'll notice there's a little bit more energy. You'll notice things are carved out a little bit more precisely within the stereo image. And again, this can really be customized to how you want to really get that sound.
And the emphasis, the low emphasis and the high emphasis, can you show us through those?
Absolutely. So low emphasis is going to be that tape head bump, so in low frequencies, which of course the particular frequency that it's at is going to depend on the inches per second that you're running at.
Right.
But so low emphasis is going to add a little bit higher a bump in those lower frequencies, good for accentuating kick drums, really low sub basses. Or if you want to remove that and have a bit more even frequency response, you can have that. Automatically, high emphasis is set to 4, which is really attempted again to create a flat frequency response.
Right.
But here as well, you can add a little bit more air to the sound by increasing or making it a little bit darker with negative or 0 emphasis.
So where does that shelf happen then? At what sort of frequency are we going to be kicking that up or down?
So that's going to be more in towards the air range, around 17K or so.
Okay,
so
right.
Exactly. And that as well will depend on the amps per second that you're set at there. Typically, most mastering is done at 30. However, if you want to get a bit more, not muddy, but a bit thicker low end, 50 inch per second is a technique that's sometimes used.
Sure. And you can use each one of these modules on buses and on groups.
That's correct.
Right.
In the advanced version of Ozone, each one of these modules can be instantiated as a plugin outside of the mothership, if you will.
Right. Okay.
Right now, I'm running Ozone as a standalone application, but of course, it also functions inside Pro Tools, Logic as VST, Audio Unit, AAX. So it's going to work in whatever host you want there.
Great, okay. And it carries over all the same processors from Ozone 6 as well then, does it?
That is correct. So all of the new processors, in addition to the previous ones, from our more transparent dynamics module to if you want to go for a bit more vibey of a sound, we have our new vintage compressor, which is, as our DSP engineer put it, a faithful emulation of a compressor that never existed.
Right, okay.
So adds a little bit more vibe. It's going to add a little bit of bounciness to your track. you'll notice that each of our vintage modules have a few different modes, each inspired by a particular different historic and well-loved piece of outboard gear.
Right, okay.
So heavily based on that. And with this as well, we have our sidechain filter, so that way if you really want to compress harder, once the vocal kicks in, you can set that around 3K to look for consonant sounds.
Sure.
Roll off the low end, which of course is how a lot of very famous FET and other compressors work to not get that really kind of like pumpingness whenever the kick hits.
Okay, right.
Additionally, we have our new vintage EQ module. Now this is a Pultec style EQ, and one of the actual unique things with this EQ is you'll see that as I make changes, you can actually visually see what's happening, which is not something that's typically shown. So it gives you a good visual representation of the coloration that you're imparting.
Is that just for this module, or is that across the whole, all of the modules?
So a lot of these modules have a lot of visual feedback. That particular EQ curve we wanted to expose particularly with the Pultec, because it's something that's really not done. It's always kind of a magical, like you twist the knob and see what happens.
Yeah, sure.
So some of these modules, like the vintage compressor, you can easily see over time, you have your gain reduction meter to show you what's going on. So again, Ozone is still heavily based around visual feedback.
Great. Okay, so is there anything else to check out, or is that all the new stuff, right?
Two quick other things here.
Okay.
One is our vintage limiter. This is also another new module inspired by the Fairchild 670. Few different modes for sort of a more variable mu kind of sound. And the thing that I am actually most excited about is the new IRC IV mode in our maximizer. The Ozone maximizer is something that's well loved by a lot of engineers. This takes it a step further and will actually process, so you can think of it as a multi-band limiter. But instead of just sending it through a series of locked crossover points, instead it's going after particular sounds that are contributing most to peak levels. So if you've got a huge hip-hop track with a huge low end, whenever that kicks in, it's going to control that low end a little bit, so that way the vocal's not going to pump or distort. So that's something we're really excited about.
And it does that automatically, does it?
That's correct. Yes, it doesn't work on fixed bands. It's going specifically after a specific sound. So you could think of processing almost more similar to a dynamic EQ in that respect.
Okay. And can we hear that in action then?
Absolutely. So I'll bring the level down a bit here. Switch mode here to transient if you want to. So you see that we're hitting right now about 6 RMS. We bring it up there and about -5. But we're not getting much distortion or pumping or anything.
Interesting. Well, I'm sure we'll look forward to trying that properly in a test situation.
Other than this, yes.
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
So how much is this going to cost then, and when's it going to be available?
So this will be available this week in just a few days here, and the pricing, so Ozone 7 standard is $199.
Okay.
And then the advanced version, again, its new pricing is $499.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Evan.
Thank you.
Cheers.